Hello, everyone. This is Kyle Holloway, and I'm here with my co host, Dustin Rainey, for another episode of Real Talk about marketing. And Dustin, this is an exciting episode we're going to have today. We are going to be talking with one of the industry leading experts on clean rooms and on the ability to leverage data. And so today with us, we have David Wells, the industry principal for media, entertainment, and advertising at Snowflake. Hey, David, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You've spent a lot of years in the industry, including some time actually at Acxiom. And so give us a snapshot of your background and how you came to be at Snowflake.
Absolutely. And thank you for the opportunity to participate. It's a pleasure. So I would say, early in my career, I started at some audience solutions, things around social targeting, um, audience solutions that were popular, that were mostly managed service. I think where my career took a turn was in 2014 when I landed at Acxiom. And I was
Mm,
part of the GPD under Dana Hayes at the time. And what we were doing was standing up more data and identity solutions. And it was just an incredible education on data and identity with the market leader. And it was just a wonderful culture. I learned a tremendous amount. We were super collaborative. It was, I would say, the start of a different type of trajectory in the industry at a place that was super important in the industry and was working with the world's largest marketers. From there, after 3 very, very happy years, I actually moved to a data and identity provider and spent about 3 years there. At the time, I was working on data monetization in their marketplace, helping different data providers surface their solutions on like DSPs and SSPs, managing some agency relationships. And there was an opportunity at Snowflake on their marketplace, leading the media and advertising industry on the Snowflake marketplace. And so on a whim, I had a conversation or two, and I talked to a leader within my present employer at the time, and he said, given where Snowflake is in the world and the way that advertising technology and marketing technology is changing, the way that data and identity is changing, I think you should take that job. So
mm,
I didn't know very much about the cloud at the time, let alone Snowflake. The first 6 months were a tremendous education. However, I think I brought a lot of what I learned at Acxiom, which was a tremendous amount. I mean, Acxiom was a crash course. And to this day, I
mm.
still draw on a lot of the things that Acxiom taught me. And so I spent about 2 years on Marketplace leading that strategy and go to market, helping providers to monetize their data. And at the time, I was moonlighting on our industry team, just providing a perspective on data and identity.
Mm.
And the gentleman who led the media and advertising team, Bill Stratton, said to me, "Well, what if you did this all the time and you actually moved to the industry team and led our adtech and martech practice?" And so I didn't contemplate that decision very long. I think I knew that I wanted to do it. I was enjoying it so much anyway. And so here I am. And I've done that, I'd say, over the last year and a half. So I'm coming up on almost 4 years at Snowflake.
Yeah, and what a ride I'm sure
Hmm.
it's been, because Snowflake has certainly had some great success over those 4 years, and has really become a central component to kind of the future of ad tech and martech across
Hmm.
most every industry. I mean, you guys are well positioned. What's that been like for you? Just, I mean, you've kind of talked about the journey of how you got there, but in particular with Snowflake and all the change that's going on in the ecosystem, like how are you staying abreast of everything?
Yeah, it's a tremendous ride. I mean, I joined shortly after our IPO, which was, one of the most successful IPOs in SaaS history, if not the most. And our trajectory was just taking off, and it's still taking off. Um, what's ironic is that some of our earliest clients at Snowflake were ad tech partners. However, they weren't necessarily surfacing client solutions. They were using us for product analytics, I would say traditional data warehouse solutions, things of that nature. And what we saw as I started on industry was a pivot towards how do we stand up more client solutions in the way of data shares or applications that will render services to marketers who are also on Snow. And, I would say shortly after I started, we launched native applications with this idea that you could package data and logic to render a service through a native application that's shared to a marketer's account. And that was one of like the turning points. Another turning point was the advent of Snowflake data clean rooms, which was just an advanced version of data sharing that two parties could join data without exposure of any of the individual PII or sensitive assets. And they could query those joins to extrapolate value, whether that's a media and advertising use case like activation. We see tremendous subscriber adoption or streamer adoption of that technology, as well as mapping of ad logs to first and third party outcomes to verify a media investment. So those two things like really have just put us on a trajectory that's tremendous. And it seems like daily there are like new solutions that we are standing up that are just making us more relevant to my industry and others. I think the latest is AI and what we're doing with things like Snowflake Cortex, where how do you leverage AI for media and advertising use cases? And I think the two uses or applications of AI that we've seen thus far in media and advertising is really automation of tasks is really a tremendous use case, and then also making Snowflake, which is a SQL-based platform that also operates with other languages, accessible to non-technical personas. So how is someone who's non-technical, who's a marketer, actually use Cortex to ask simple questions of their data or talk to their data? And so the one thing I would say about Snowflake, which was true of Acxiom when I was there too, is like the most enjoyable part of my job is that it's always in education, right? There's always things to learn. We're always trying to push ourselves forward. We're always trying to serve our marketers that use partner technologies or our technologies. We're always trying to serve our partners. And so day to day, it's just, how do I push it forward? How do I push it forward? How do I serve my partners? How do I serve our marketers?
Man, that's awesome, David. And
Mm-hmm.
it's been fun just kind of sitting back and watching, Snowflake and the trajectory you guys have been on, and how really you're starting to become this kind of central ecosystem across advertisers, publishers, the place where everyone can kind of share in new creative ways data, right? And it's interesting also that to hear your lineage, and thank you, by the way, for your comments about Acxiom. We were actually honored to have you in the company, but it's always great to have somebody that really understands like deep topics like identity in our kind of key partnerships like Snowflake. So with that said, data, that's like the currency, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people talk about identity, for instance, in the context of direct matching. And, people don't really understand where data, comes to play when you're trying to make some of these matches inside the context of a clean room.
Mm-hmm.
With your experience and your background at Acxiom, has that really lended you an advantage on understanding kind of how companies like Acxiom and there's others that can leverage these kind of more scale, data assets to help in those kind of clean room matches?
It does tremendously, both at the individual and at the household level. I draw on the lessons that I learned about data and identity at Acxiom, I would say probably daily. And as recently as yesterday, I was talking to a marketer and he was asking me about a use case and in terms of like CRM and how data and identity was important. And he was a retailer. And I used my own personal experience. And the experience that I talked about was, I'm David Wells. I have my PII associated with me. They might have some information about me. My partner is Alon Donahue. She doesn't share my same last name, and she has her own PII attributes and or PII touch points and attributes about her. And unless they have a partner like Acxiom who's able to sort of view those two individuals through their massive data set and logic and understand that they're actually married and have a 2.5-year-old daughter and they're of this demographic makeup, um, they will continue to sort of look at them as two separate individuals and not market to them as a household. And there's incredible value in understanding the individuals as their own, individual, as well as a household, because many times that's incredibly important to, media and advertising use cases, whether you're talking about activation and targeting them as a household or you're talking about measurement. And that's where I think Acxiom has not only taught me a tremendous amount, however, we see value in your data and identity actually on our platform when we talk to our largest marketers. When they want to understand and retain and communicate with their customers, they have to have a trusted partner who allows them to have that view of the individual and household, as well as a privacy compliant way of understanding who they are and how to interact with them and do so in a way that's respectful of that relationship and not invasive. And I think that's where Acxiom is very differentiated.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, that's a
Yeah.
great example right there. I mean, you just kind of hit on all the key points of a referential partner that can help you understand, the world from a perspective that maybe the first party can't, because you don't have all those underlying connectivities and associations at your readiness on the first party side, but leveraging a referential partner to kind of bring those together and then add in all those insights. It's kind of, I've always said, it's like, what you know. The referential partner may know what they know, and the real power is when you bring those together, because what we collectively know can really power a consumer experience that is exceptional and can really drive business.
Yeah.
And really for Acxiom, Snowflake and how you guys have leaned in, as you talked about, into the native application framework, as well as the clean room architecture. And you guys just recently had a pretty big announcement and move around the clean room with the purchase of Samuha. Really enables all of that in a whole new dynamic in the brand's own ecosystem within Snowflake that really hasn't been possible prior to this. Can you talk a little bit about that, just how that native application framework functions, what bringing in Samuha meant for Snowflake, and kind of where you guys are positioning all of that going forward?
Absolutely. So we had stood up our data clean room framework, and some large clients who are predominantly streamers had adopted it. We also had partners that had their own clean rooms and they developed their Snowflake instance using our framework. And what we saw was that there was just a transformational shift, and we thought clean rooms would become more and more important in terms of media and advertising use cases. When we looked at Samuha, what was become the Snowflake data clean room, what we saw was a very Snowflake first approach, and also their leadership was very strong. So Kamakshi had very successful runs in ad tech, and she brought some of that industry knowledge to, Samuha on Snowflake. And what they had done was they had stood up two versions. One is out of the box, which is super accessible. And so accessibility was super important. And then also a developer edition, where if an individual wanted to sort of tweak or refine their own instance of a Snowflake data cleanroom, they could do so. And so that ultimately led to the acquisition. And I think what we see in Snowflake data clean rooms is not only value in terms of the media and advertising use cases with marketers or publishers that want to leverage them. There's also tremendous power in the wider Snowflake partner ecosystem, of which Acxiom is a significant part, and the way that their data and services can add value to Snowflake data clean rooms. So if I'm a large marketer and I want to resolve identity on either part of a join to get a more scalable match, Acxiom Real Identity is an incredible, powerful tool to power that join and to get more scalable matches. If I want to enrich those matches with a third-party data set, Acxiom Infobase is a tremendous data set, and develop a model on top of that. And so it's not only Snowflake has always operated at the infrastructure level, where we were sort of the platform on which partners would sort of stand up their applications or render services. And so I think when we acquired Samuha, which was an application that used our framework, there were some eyebrows that were raised. However, our perspective was it was so critical to media and advertising as well as other industries. And it was critical because it was a vehicle that would not only serve the marketers in those media and advertising use cases on Snow, it would also serve the partners in the media data cloud or the partner ecosystem on Snow that would make them available that would add value to the Snowflake data clean room, or that they would make available to the Snowflake data clean room. So to talk about Acxiom, the ability to have your real identity native app actually in Snowflake data clean room, it simply adds a tremendous amount of value to that capability on Snowflake. To have your data available in a Snowflake data clean room, it just adds a tremendous amount of value. And so I think that was ultimately, it wasn't my decision to acquire Samuha. However, I obviously said, yes, it's a great idea. I've seen their technology and it's tremendous. But I think the leadership, that was their thinking, is that it was a great unlock, not only for marketers, also for the partner ecosystem, if that helps.
Yes, David, one of the things that, I like to say too is, we've kind of seen it since 2017, 2018, data privacy become, forefront of everyone's minds, right? And I'd like to say the days of the Wild West and digital transformation are kind of coming to an end. We're starting to see, cookies. Kyle and I just had a impromptu, session on Google's decision not to deprecate. But Snowflake kind of having this kind of central ecosystem and the ability to not do data sharing or do data sharing, without having to move data.
That's right.
Right. So I think talk about one of the value adds in the context of data privacy. Where do you see Snowflake really providing that ability for brands to kind of trust that if their data is getting shared, it's not actually getting moved or being taken and used in other ways that maybe they wouldn't want to.
That's right. If you ship your data somewhere, what becomes of it? And it's a very novel concept. I mean, when I started to talk to Snowflake and they were talking about this idea of a data share, it was so new to me. It was hard to wrap my head around it when I had that initial conversation. The analogy that we often use is a Google Drive or a Google spreadsheet. You might have data in a Google spreadsheet and you want to share it with me so that I can extrapolate some value. And you can do that and I can query it. However, it still stays on your G Drive. And you can put guardrails around what I'm able to query. And so I can extrapolate that value, but there's still that single copy of your data that lives on your drive. And that's really the idea around a shared data architecture of Snowflake, is that it's this massive database and data can live with partitions, and you can share whether within your org or with a partner, and you can allow them to query that data so that you're able to collaborate, which is an overused word. However, that's really part of Snowflake's differentiation, not only the tech, but the culture. And when we talk about data clean rooms, it's just an advanced case. I shouldn't say just, it's an advanced case of data sharing, where two or more parties are actually able to join data sets without movement on a common key, so that each of them can query that data and extrapolate value. And they can put up guidelines or use templates to say, hey, this is what I'll allow you to view based on that match. Although there's privacy in place so that you can't shard or reverse engineer any of that data that's allowed to be viewed into more individual or sensitive information that would violate privacy. And, data clean rooms are delivered as a native application. There are other native applications that render services like enrichment or identity resolution as well. And the idea is not only to protect the sensitive data of the marketer who might use that solution, like IDR, it's also to protect the IP of the person who is delivering that service, right? So the idea around native applications, data clean room or otherwise, is, hey, we all want to collaborate and it will allow us to achieve our goals, but we want to do so in a way that we bring our own sort of guidelines on how we collaborate. We only let you see what we want you to see. We're going to protect our IP or our sensitive data. And above all else, we'll protect the privacy of the individual consumers of marketers that are on the platform. And that's really the great design of native applications, is more collaboration, less data movement, privacy and governance at the center.
Yeah, and you talked earlier about kind of media being one of the central use cases, things you're focused on. If you think about like the past couple of decades, how cookies have played a key role, wiring up, programmatic across the open internet, and people have kind of bought on this kind of bid stream, right? Where do you see Snowflake? Because all that stuff's happening in real time, right, at scale. How do you see Snowflake kind of playing a role in media from that kind of technological perspective, with privacy in mind and data sharing? Because it seems like a little bit more difficult than just a cookie, right? So where do you see this going?
It's a good question.
Snowflake.
It's a great question, and I think Google's announcement where they're like putting a moratorium on the deprecation of cookies, or maybe it never happens, is interesting. I think people were, sort of surprised. However, they were going to sort of continue on the same tracks that they were headed anyway. People didn't want dependencies on third-party cookies. I think marketers were moving towards more of a first-party world. I think we've seen, in terms of addressable media, more concentration on areas where there was like an authenticated individual. So like streaming obviously has become incredibly important. Retail media and other commerce networks have become increasingly important. On the programmatic world, initially when I was at Snowflake and on the industry team where I led adtech and martech, a lot of the DSPs and SSPs were more attuned to this idea of encryption, where instead of like data clean rooms to necessarily power things like activation and then attribution. And so what they'd say is, I might, resolve to a key and encrypt a data set with a persistent token or identifier, and then onboard it to my platform. And that key will then pick up my graph, and then I'll use that graph to expand it to other device IDs, IPs, MAIDs, what have you. And then I'll use that to target. And so we were the step prior to the actual activation. I think what we've seen, at least the trend line with programmatic platforms, is what they're now doing is they're taking graphs, like online and offline graphs, and they're actually putting them in a clean room, and they're using that to power the onboarding and attribution process. So if you're an SSP, you might put a online and offline graph in that clean room, allow a marketer who wants to activate to share to that clean room and run a query against that share to say, just return all the device IDs on the match of their hem to the hem in my graph. And then they onboard those device IDs, package it with inventory, and the marketer picks it up through a PMP. And so it's a tremendous shift from the way that we started, which was I'm just going to resolve to a key and onboard that and then expand it in my graph once it's in my platform. And then on the flip side, they're then surfacing ad logs, and they're using that same graph to map those impressions to a key that will map to an outcome, whether first or third party. And so we actually presented on that at Snow Summit in June of this year, and there was a tremendous response. And so we see opportunity for identity now, not only in native applications for identity resolution and mapping impressions to outcomes, but also just identity linkages. And having this kind of, if you're a programmatic platform, not only a single graph, but maybe like a Franken-graph, which is your own unique super graph through multiple partners, powering things like onboarding and activation, and allowing you to differentiate and manage frequency and have really good scale. And all the better if you can sort of add, demographic data to some of those insights as well. So that's kind of the most recent trend that we've seen, is that real programmatic platform adoption of Snowflake Data Cleanroom in conjunction with identity linkages and data. It was something that was already happening with media networks or streamers that were on our platform. And we think that that will likely continue and just take on a new trajectory. And, if you're a provider like Acxiom, who has that view of the universe in an online and offline world, and you can power some of that more data-driven targeting or data-driven measurement, that's where Acxiom provides a tremendous amount of value.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I love how, necessity is the mother of invention, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
that's right.
It was kind of like Google was kind of pressing in a direction. And so there was this natural kind of response to that as people innovated around it. And then even now, the fact that, whether or not Google kind of puts as you put, a moratorium on it long term or eternally, it doesn't really matter. There's enough of a flywheel effect started with folks like Snowflake, with the retailers, with other streamers and such, that now it's like, hey, there's a new model here that's actually highly effective, more accurate, a greater degree of transparency, and manages in a privacy compliant kind of governed fashion that is really a significant step forward. And so, that's been my response to it, right? It's just like, hey, interesting that they changed their mind, but the whole industry has moved forward.
That's right.
Let's keep moving, because this is a very positive direction. And now it's just a matter of like, okay, how do you dovetail, some of those capabilities back in to your overall strategy, taking into account consumer consent and those kind of signals. So that's pretty exciting. I did want to pivot just for a second. We've kind of talked about the use of Snowflake and kind of in the ecosystem and stuff, but talk to me for a minute about the hyperscalers, right? Because you've got AWS, you've got GCP, Azure, all these guys, and you guys partner very closely with them. What's that relationship like? What are you hearing from the hyperscalers in regard to like Snowflake and the capabilities, and kind of what's your strategy going forward there?
Yeah, I mean, they're all very close partners. And Snowflake is a platform that sits atop all the public clouds and regions. We think part of our differentiation is really that we sit across all the clouds and regions. And so, if you use Snowflake across Azure and AWS or GCP, like you can actually sort of operate across all those public clouds and regions, and that's part of the reason that we're unique in the space. There are ways or areas where we compete in market. So one of those is like clean rooms, right? We have the Snowflake Data Clean Room, or what was Samuha, and some of those other clouds providers actually have their own sort of data clean rooms or methodologies. In our opinion, and we're at a critical point, is that really all data clean rooms have to interoperate. It's not, hey, you're only on Snowflake Data Clean Room or you're not. Like, we've had ongoing conversations with our cloud partners on how our data clean rooms can talk to one another. So that's just one instance of where we have competing products. However, we really want to work with them to push the industry forward. And I think that's like super important. I think our opinion is that an open ecosystem is a stronger ecosystem where all parties are able to work together to put the industry forward. Another area is AI, right? And training of models. Some of our closest partners have, competing solutions where you can train large language models, and we have our own. And I think we know the areas where we'll compete. However, we always come with the mindset that if there's an area to partner, we will do so. And also, the underlying platform of Snowflake on top of those cloud providers, we always look for ways to work together to surface a solution that's best with the customer. If there is a customer who's talking about a clean room, whether ours or AWS, like, we lead with the customer interest. Or if they're talking about an AI solution and training a model, we always lead with the customer interest, and we try to speak to our differentiation. But I think that open-mindedness is super important. It's something that's unique to Snowflake. Like, we talked about collaboration as an overused word. It is inherent in our technology, but it's very much inherent in our culture. Whether you're work at Snowflake and you have to work with the people that are also at Snowflake, or you're talking about the partners that in some places you'll compete. And so we always take that mindset no matter what we're doing, if that helps.
Yeah. No, I mean, I love that. And I think you guys are right on a trend, forward looking of that combination of interoperability, even kind of composability of, your solution set and which components are you leveraging across which platform. And then certainly on the collaboration side. So those kind of three areas converged together make for a really powerful offering. And I know Acxiom has been able to make use of a lot of that, and the ability to, I know for myself in particular, leading our identity product suite, the ability to like launch native apps and very quickly be able to launch that then across multiple hyperscalers.
Yeah.
Right.
And
that's huge, because historically that was like, oh, that's a whole nother development cycle. I'm going to go to this hyperscaler and build something out. Oh, now I've got to go over to this one, build something out. But the ability to create like an IDR native application, deploy it, and then very quickly run it across multiple hyperscaler environments is a powerful addition. So I think you guys are doing great on that regard.
Well, thank you. Yeah. And I think you're right about composability. I mean, that's a trend that started a while ago. And we also often talk about composability and accountability, which is, there's one view of the world where it's like, I will throw up walls and I may have a stack that provides, 5 of 5 solutions, although, maybe only 3 of 5 are best of breed. However, when you sort of enter into a large enterprise agreement with you, I'm selling all 5. And people are ultimately a little upset. They're locked in. They feel trapped. This idea of composable solutions through applications and stringing together like a stack that is unique to you with data and identity as the core, linking all of those stack and allowing those native applications not only to access them in a composable nature, but that they're then accountable, right? They prove out their value when you adopt them, and you don't have this sense of that you're trapped into this large agreement. I think that's incredibly powerful, and that's a lot of the reasons that large marketers have migrated to Snowflake. It's much of the reason that partners like yourself have stood up native applications because they know the services that those applications render are best in breed. And they know that once people get a taste of like IDR or enrichment or what have you, they're going to want more. And so that's I guess the single silo or monolith solution and composable are not necessarily mutually exclusive. Like people want to have the option to cobble together their own stack, but they're willing to lean into a partner like an Acxiom because Acxiom is best of breed. And when they discover Acxiom, if they're a new client through IDR or Infobase or what have you, they're more willing to say to you, like, tell me what else you have on Snowflake. And I think when you allow them that option and you have that accountability and your data and services are rendered and are very performant, I think that's a good place in which to find yourself. That's one of the reasons we're so bullish about the Acxiom Snowflake partnership. I'm a little biased because I work there and I sort of knew about the decades legacy of data and identity, but I think
bias is good.
yeah,
I
I
agree.
mean, it is. Let's put it this way, though. I'm able to defend myself as more people see the products and solutions that you stand up, and they see that you're not living off your legacy. Like what you have is very differentiated,
I appreciate
and
that.
there's a reason for that. Yeah.
Yeah, David, to kind of add maybe a real life example of what you're talking about, that interoperability, the kind of composability. If you think about companies that have already invested in things like CDPs, right? So that's kind of been top of mind. It's like, how can they leverage Snowflake services when they've already invested in applications, all right, in their martech stack? So like Adobe, right? We're already starting to see some integrations happen with people who have invested in Adobe and then making callbacks, that are natively integrated back into Snowflake to get some of those, privacy-centric identity capabilities, like you said, identity being the core that kind of glues everything together. We're starting to kind of see you guys help wire the ecosystem together like that. And I think that's really cool. And I see that absolutely being the trajectory, the way forward, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's what we think too. I mean, Adobe is a perfect example. I mean, they're a client, a very important client and a partner. And I can't tell you how many times people ask me, like, is Snowflake a CDP? And the answer is no, we're not. Like, there are some CDP type capabilities that are available in Snowflake. However, we really see Snowflake as a complement to CDPs, like, an Adobe, like an AEP, right? There's work that you may want to do with data and identity actually in Snowflake and surface those segments or those models actually in the Adobe CDP that really complement one another very well. And name a CDP, that's where we want to partner with them. We see ourselves as additive and unlocking more power out of the tech stack that marketers might have today. And a lot of that is really tied to data and identity and some of the work that happens in Snowflake. But we see ourselves as a great complement and a great unlock. And to your point, sort of the glue amongst that adtech and martech stack.
Yeah, awesome. Well, David, unfortunately, we're getting close to running out of time today. We do have a few lightning round questions we'd like
Please.
to throw your way.
Okay.
First being, what was the biggest buzz at Cannes this year?
AI.
You guys are there, so
Yes.
AI. Okay.
Or my poor choice of Mediterranean wardrobe, but probably AI.
Nice.
Excellent.
We'll have to go dig up some pictures there to see. Yeah, Kyle, you want to go for the next?
Yeah, sure. Just a lot of stuff going on in the industry. What's your go-to source for keeping tabs on everything?
That's a great question. Digiday, Media Post, Adweek, Ad Exchanger. I'd say that's fed into my inbox, and I try to consume of that as much as possible.
Sweet. All right. We'll end with a standard wrap-up question.
Mm-hmm.
So if you fed all the data about David Wells into AI, what are the 3 words that would produce it would produce to describe you?
Probably dad and spouse first and foremost. So I would say partner, because I'm actually a partner to my wife and still a parent to my daughter, but also really in my job, in my day job. Like that's how I try to sort of view like clients and or partners. Like we're in the business of making our clients and partners successful, and if I don't, then I failed you. Maybe student, because I consider myself a student of the industry, a student of the technology that I sell, a student of the partners where we go to market together. And then, I would have to say optimistic, because like our jobs are tough, right? They're changing constantly. More often than not, people can tell us no, like when we want to do something together. You have to stay optimistic. You have to stay persistent, and you have to just find a way. So those are probably the 3 things. It's a good question. That's a tough question.
Well, you did a great job. I
Thank
see
you.
all 3 for sure. And it's absolutely been an honor and a privilege to get to work with you over the past several years as we've kind of built these native integrations of our products and capabilities with you guys. First off, with your native applications, I think it's really cool seeing that take off. And I know our listeners, they got a lot out of this conversation today. I'm sure hope they got as much as we did. So thank you for being a guest. We look forward to having you back sometime in the near future as we release other cool things together. Right?
I would love that. Nothing would make me happier. I mean, I think the world of Acxiom, and I'm excited to do more together and to work more together and to solve more problems.